Wonderful. Well, thank you, Maja. And needless to say, of course, like Maja, I love Ola's work. Once I started researching and talking to her, and it's great. For those of you who might have been disappointed with Maja throwing shade at astrology, it's just going to get worse from here but you should have known. For those of you who have studied Gnosticism, know two things. Harold Bloom said, the central dictum of Gnosticism is what can be broken should be broken. Number two, the Gnostics hated the stars. They knew the stars, but they were going to war with the stars and going beyond it. So no surprises, but yeah, Ola will take us away. And again, love her research. Best of all, she loves cats almost as much as I love cats. So good job.
Thank you, Miguel. Can you guys hear me? I can hear myself, which is probably a bonus. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was told to stay in the light, so I'm gonna have to be less animated than I was hoping for. I'm gonna probably be a little bit controversial today. For those who don't know me, which is probably most of you, I come from Poland. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this with subtitles, so I hope you will understand me. And I'll be speaking about a bit of a different view to things, which I'm going to invite you to join me. Feminine alchemy. Her story in history. Or in his story. What's the missing link? Why is that the missing link? So, just a quick word about me. By background, I'm an engineer. I'm an oil and gas engineer with about 15, 17 years of work in that field. So I come from pretty logical, analytical, left brain background, coming sort of through the back door into the topic of Gnosticism, but not only. Clearly still staying within the energy field. What I would like to do today is to ask you to, for an hour, I'll try to keep it on time, for an hour, forget everything you know. Everything, including the philosophies, including the interpretations, including the theories that you might have come across, that you have heard, the lenses through which we have been looking at the topic of Sophia, Gnosticism, and do something a little bit differently for an hour. You see, I used to call myself a seeker or a researcher until I got to a point where I kind of found out that research and seeking is not enough. It's just, there is no answer there. Because the truth doesn't need research. The truth is felt. That's not how the people in the past would live through or perhaps perceive, learn the world. It came in a different way. Shamans did not have philosophers, but they embodied a lot of wisdom. Women of the past perhaps didn't know philosophy, perhaps didn't study, didn't research, but there was a lot of wisdom embedded there. People just knew. I come from Eastern Europe. We have a lot of ethnic wisdom in the East, Eastern Europe there. So ancient Scythia, that would be the area of the current Ukraine, a little bit of Russia, bordering with, obviously, with Poland and a little bit of that Eastern Bloc. So a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge is coded in our legends, in mythology, in folklore, in tales that you tell children, and you just think that this is just entertainment. But is it? Is it just entertainment? Are legends, myths, are they only that? Are they just stories? Are they some kind of, should they be understood through the lens of psychology? Because that's most of the time, that's the approach. This is something to do with consciousness. This is something to do with how people perceive certain things, states of mind. What if we got it wrong? What if that's wrong? What if that's not the way? What if that kind of approach takes us to polish the bars of the prison from the inside, but never be able to actually see the big picture? So for an hour, or today, perhaps for the whole conference, from my side, I'm not coming to you as a seeker. I'm not coming to you as a researcher. I'm coming to you as a woman who would like to take you on a journey through a bit different perspective based on ancient teachings of the feminine line that I have been exposed to by my background. But also, I don't actually live in Poland anymore. I traveled a little bit, lived in different parts of Europe. Currently, I live in Norway, in the north. It's been 12 years now. And obviously, we have the local Norse mythology. We have the one of the oldest ethnic groups in the world, the Sami people. I've been also exposed to the shamanic teachings of the Northern American, the South America as well. And as it happens, because I am pain in the ass when I need to find out something, I've realized that you cannot really find all the answers if you just go down one rabbit hole, if you only look into one philosophy, one way of looking at things. You kind of have to pretty much go through them all. Impossible? Maybe. Or maybe that's what they told us, that you have to specialize. You have to go down one rabbit hole, and that's what you're gonna know. That's where you're gonna find the answers. That's not the case. So when you actually look across the board, and what I mean by that is shamanism across the world, different geographies, mythology across the world, not just one, not just the Greek, not just Roman, Sumerian, Vedic, Norse, South American, North American, African, Polynesian culture, folklore of different cultures. What happens? We find common themes across all these cultures. And again, if we take the psychology approach, right, we find out, we get told that, oh, there was migrations, people moved around, so similar stories get repeated in different parts of the world. That's what happened. But what if that's not what happened? I mean, how many lies have we been told in history, right? History. Who came up with history? Who writes history? The losers? The winners? The victors? You know, I was at a Viking museum in Norway some time ago. And of course, it's a really nice museum, highly recommended, in Lofoten, Viking Museum. And they they will take you there on a sort of less or more personal experience of explaining the history. And during one of those tours, I've asked questions. They were talking about the Eddas, they were talking about the Nordic texts, and I've asked them who wrote them. Oh, they were written by, you know, whoever was ordering those texts to be written. Okay, who orders those texts to be written? Oh, that would have been somebody with money. That would have been somebody in charge, somebody who decides what gets to be written. So where are the stories that don't get written about? Where is that version of the truth that doesn't get promoted or censored? It lands in folklore. It lands in mythology. Yeah, it does. But what we have already, or we should be realizing, is that all these texts, including mythology, they've been tampered with. They've been tampered with by very those that benefit from however they want us to perceive the reality, however they want us to perceive the history. That's what we get told. Look at the last 4 years. It's just happened. Why is there censorship? Who comes up with that? So if that happened in the last 4 years, could that have happened over the past thousands and thousands of years? So where is the truth? Is truth really something that we can get to through research? Research into what? Into texts that have been tampered with? Into symbology that has been tampered with? By whom? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. So are we free in this world? Well, I think if anyone had any illusions about that, they probably would have been crushed in the last 4 years, I hope. So the quote at the bottom is pretty much the reason why I do what I do. Feminine alchemy, her story in history, in his story. Before we even touch Sophia, I want you to think about the feminine, just the feminine side, the feminine tradition. Because as we find out across pretty much all the cultures in the world, through the artifacts, through the folklore, through the stories, long time ago, there was a feminine tradition. There was feminine worship, or perhaps reverence, should I say. And something happened. At some point, something happens, and everything gets flipped on its head. The feminine tradition gets suppressed. So we need to be looking for consistency. Not only the texts that are written, but also the oral tradition. In the feminine tradition, the oral tradition was the one to carry the wisdom. It wasn't a written word. Written word is actually associated with the masculine tradition. And if on top of that, if we realize that the texts have been tampered with, what text? Most of them. The Bible, the interpretation, a lot of the text, from what I've seen, is that the interpretation of the texts is literal. Or psychology is used. The mind, Sophia, wisdom. consciousness. Where is that? Wisdom. What if that's not the place? What if wisdom or consciousness that Sophia represents is not the wisdom of the mind? What if it's wisdom but associated with a totally different principle? And the feminine principle, because this is Sophia, this is the feminine principle, that's not associated with the mind. And I will show you throughout this presentation why not with the mind? And why the mind? The playground of the gods, the playground of the archons, mind control. Where does that come from? So are you really in charge of your mind? Or are you being projected from outside? And our experience, or perhaps what we think we experience, is not exactly your choice. A simulation. Original creation, according to the ancient texts, is feminine. And I'm gonna build on what Maja said earlier. Purely feminine. There is no masculine participation in that. Parthenogenesis. This is not me. This is every single geography. But I want you to pay attention to what stands here. Because, and you know that, right? So there is always this context of abyss, darkness, void mentioned at the original creation. And even if we sort of take the journey down the scientific path, right, with the NASA, our friends, what do they say? That the whole matter, everything was created from a black hole. Yeah, matter is created from a black hole. How else do they call the black holes? Galactic womb. Interesting. Interesting how they slide a bit of truth into the story. So even they come absolutely clean. And that is the echo of these teachings. So again, remember, we're not looking at this. Please, let's switch off the mind, okay? Let's forget everything we know. Let's just try to wipe everything out, and let's walk through this remaining 40 minutes or so just with a feeling. Perhaps that's the way we used to do it until something happened. Why is the feminine so important? Or why the primordial creation is feminine? Why is it so important? Is it important? Certainly not in a sense of any level of supremacy, okay? This is not where we're going with this. But perhaps there is something about the feminine that we have forgotten about, or perhaps it has been so suppressed over time that we have totally disconnected and totally forgot the entirety of that landscape, of what the feminine brings. Underlying structure of existence in all stories has always been conceived of as a dark void. There is that blackness, there is that darkness, there is that nothingness, the 0 point field, as the quantum physics would have called it, the blackness. Please pay attention to that, because Maja mentioned the red. I'm going to be talking about the red, the black, and the white. And that's the black. That's the blackness. You know, I come from Poland, in Kraków, at the cathedral, and also at some of the artifacts outside. You can see the Virgin Mary with the baby. She's black. She's fully black, including her hands, including her face. If you do not understand the meaning of the colors, this is not art. This is not some kind of creative endeavor of whoever made it. No, no, no. Certain symbols, certain meanings have been very carefully encoded into art, into architecture, for those with the eyes to see only. And the missing link that I'm talking about here is alchemy, is feminine alchemy, opposed to masculine alchemy. Masculine alchemy, turning lead into gold and all that kind of matrixy stuff based on, you know, how much money can we make from it. That's not feminine alchemy. Feminine alchemy, totally different context. Totally different context. So, at the center point, there is always the womb. Which, okay, perhaps this is normal and obvious because that's how we are born. But what if the act of being born physically is just a little expression, a little example of a much wider capacity of the feminine alchemy, through which, by the way, this is not reserved for goddesses. This is not reserved for Sophia, not in a context of personification. What if we're talking about every woman, every female being that embodies the feminine principle? Why? Because of the womb. The cauldron, the chalice, and the Holy Grail. What if the Holy Grail is not something to be ever found anywhere, dug out, but what if the Holy Grail is the womb of alchemical woman? Who is an alchemical woman? That's what we're gonna try to answer. And please pay attention to the last quote. I put it there on purpose. It stands out a little bit, and perhaps it might raise some questions because it's a little bit different from the other ones. I put it there on purpose. A lot of the Eastern teachings, they seem to go down the promiscuous path, that kind of sexuality, sensuality, but very much in a kind of pleasure and that kind of context. Whereas that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what the interpretation is. There is something to do with the womb, something alchemical, certain abilities, capacities, processes that the womb would have been in the past and still can be capable of, that was suppressed. And let's just hold that thought when thinking about the fall of Sophia. Is the wisdom, you know, there are ethnic groups that I've met, when you tell them or when you talk to them about consciousness or about identity, they don't point here, they don't point here, me, they point here. Here, Sophia. Wisdom of the womb. Not wisdom here. Not intelligence. Not wisdom through experience. Something totally different. principle that creates universes. Not creative as in drawing, painting, so much more. Creation versus creativity, creation. Why is it so important? Because through the feminine principle, we used to have access to everything. The woman is a tree of life. Why? Norse mythology, it's not far from home for me. Norse mythology, Yggdrasil, the tree of life, which is obviously present in every single culture. It is present everywhere, from the Kabbalistic tradition through the Northern American, Norse, everywhere we have the tree. Sumerian, stories about the tree, Bible, tree in the Eden. The tree, is it physical? Obviously we're not talking about physical. We're talking about energetic construct of this world that's also reflected, as we find out, from the ancient teachings, shamanistic teachings, alchemical teachings of women, the oral tradition of women. Tree of life is the energetic construct of a woman. Please forget about the Kabbalistic tree of life, okay? Because, like I say, certain things have been tampered with, and there's been this masculine layer placed over it. Things have been very logical. They've been made to make a lot of sense. We've been disconnected from the sensing, feeling, and we've been disconnecting from the original tradition. Earlier this year, I went a couple of times to Egypt, and I wanted to see as much as possible. So I've been to all sorts of different excursions and trips, and I had, of course, you have to have your guide with you, which we did. And the funny thing is that they can't really answer many questions. They know everything. They know everything about the architecture. They can tell you what time, they can tell you how and where and everything, but when you ask them anything deeper, they don't know. I just didn't have one bad guide. I had multiple. Ask similar questions. They have absolutely zero clue on the alchemical connection. Why, for example, in Luxor, there is the at one of the temples, you have 40 sort of sphinxes with the head of a ram. Why ram? Oh, because they thought ram was smart. Oh, really? Oh, so dumb as a sheep comes from that, right? They have no idea. And when you go deeper, why other things are there? What's the meaning of the boat? Ark of Covenant. What is that? Oh, it was just there. It's that they used to. That's how they used to move on the River Nile. I mean, it's quite entertaining. I recommend. So there is a whole side of interpretation that we're totally missing out on if we take away the alchemy lens. And the alchemy lens, of course, it is taken away, because most of the scholars, academics, the people working at the excavations, archaeologists, they don't have that lens. They don't have that lens. They don't even know that it exists. That feminine alchemy teachings, this is hidden. This is wisdom that's hidden. That lens it is for those with the eyes to see only. Perhaps something more than just that. So what happened? This is me putting that timeline, okay? So you can disagree. When you think about shamanism, very often shamanism is mentioned as the sort of oldest tradition. in the world. Some people even talk about, thousands of years, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even going into millions, depending what evidence we look into. However, when we actually dig a little bit deeper into shamanism, shamanism actually originated from something prior to shamanism. That's the original tradition that I'm talking about. This is not a school of thought. This is not a philosophy. This is not some kind of practice. Feminine alchemy, and we can call it however we want. I just happen to come up with this term because it kind of nicely describes what I want to talk about. Feminine alchemy is literally the full capacity of a woman's, female's, hormonal system, including the physical structure of our body, the energetic structure of our body, and the hormonal. The hormones are sort of a bridge between dimensions, if you like. This is not a philosophy. This is the reality. This is how women are constructed. So, shamanism evolved out of alchemy. It actually evolved out of one of the aspects of alchemy. Probably many of you heard about the aspects of alchemy. Maja mentioned the virgin. So we have the virgin, maiden aspect, but that's just one aspect associated with the color white and blue. And guess what? That's why Virgin Mary, dressed in white and blue. The color red, associated with creating, creator, mother. That's the second aspect, mother, creator, color red. And the third one, the black, the shaman, a woman as a witch, as a shaman, witch. Those three aspects, we will dive into them in a second. Those three aspects are associated with specific different sort of functions or abilities that we can tap into as a woman. Okay, there is no please do not get triggered. There's no supremacy here. This is just how we are constructed. And unfortunately, which I'm gonna come to in a minute, what happened? We have lost access to a lot of those capacities, or we have forgotten how to even connect to that. So that is the beginning, the womb cosmology that we still find in the caves, in the paintings. Why in the caves the paintings are done with the color red? Or what are they even done with that continue to be there for thousands, tens of thousands of years? What is the color red? Right? Of course, one of the most important secretions in alchemy, the blood. So what happens? Something happens here. This moment, we know from ancient texts as well. We know that from Rig Veda, we know that from Sumerian creation myth, Enuma Elish, we know that from the Bible, we know that from Norse mythology. Something happens, someone shows up, something changes. And of course, in the Sumerian mythology, in the Sumerian ancient texts, this is explained as the Enuma Elish, it is explained as the fight between Marduk and Tiamat. So the Anunnaki show up. And you know what? It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to go into exactly what were they doing here, why. This is irrelevant. The point is somebody shows up. We have been living like this. There was civilization here before. Somebody shows up, and a change happens. Anunnaki, that's how they are called in the Sumerian. The Olympus gods, well, that's how they called in Greece. the gods in the Norse mythology. That's Thor and Odin and the gang. And their mates from Egypt. It's the same gang. It's the same beings. Different geographies are referring to them in different ways. Simple. That's the God of the Bible, by the way. And I'm sorry if I'm triggering someone, but we have to. I asked you to be open just for an hour. That's it. Later we can think whatever we want. The God of the Bible, not a great guy, right? Kind of likes a bit of terror. After the Old Testament, okay, things change a little bit. But that's interesting because something happens, right? Something happens there. So here is the critical moment. Because the ones that come here to take over, the Anunnaki, the Archons, yeah, that's the same group. We can call them whatever we want. Archon, by the way, right? From Greek, what does that mean? Ruler or Lord. Look at the Bible. How is your Bible written? Right? Who do we call in the Bible? The Lord said this, Lord did that. Who's the God? Who's the Lord? Well, I'm sorry to say, but most of the prayers have been translated from ancient Egyptian prayers to Amun-Ra and his secret name, Amen. The archons, the gods. Am I saying there is no creative force prior to that? Of course there is. This is why we started off with the fact that the original creation is feminine. And all the prehistoric cultures refer to a great mother or some kind of loving creative force. But the gods that we know through religions, that's a different story. And that's something a little bit more malevolent. Specifically, we find out through the ancient text about the creation. Moon gets created. Moon is not a natural satellite. Moon gets created. That gets mentioned in the Rig Veda. That gets mentioned in the Enuma Elish, for example. That gets mentioned in the Norse mythology as well, creation of the moon. The firmament gets created. What does that mean? Well, actually, it doesn't mean just the skies and the earth. It means there is some kind of structure that's being suddenly created. These guys are probably millions of years ahead of us. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to explain to you the technology behind it, even though I'm an engineer. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with highly, highly advanced technology, AI, that has been used to create, and we know that. We know that this is Sophia, right? That's exactly, precisely, beautifully described, exactly what we're dealing with. Archons, gods, yeah? And what happens? Patriarchy. The fall of the feminine. Not so much a fall as probably suppression is a better word. Why? Why? Why patriarchy? Why suddenly the one who's physically stronger is better? Well, Sumerian tablets, a little bit of Sumerian, looking into the Sumerian text, tells us that this wasn't their first rodeo. They've done these things before they came to Earth. So there's been a disconnect at that level of the archons, gods, the Anunnaki. Anunnaki, that's not a race, that's a name. Anunnaki, the ones that came from heaven onto the earth. That's all it means. So it's just a description. There's been a disconnect. There was a disconnect originally in that race between the males and the females. The males wanted to be dominant. They wanted to take over. They become aggressive. They wanted the hegemony over the universe. Females always stood by life. They defended life. So they did not condone the plans of their counterparts. So there was a disconnect at that level. When they came here and they saw that the females on Earth, the women on Earth, in their alchemy, meaning full capacity, okay, this is not a woo-woo language, I'm talking full capacity of their hormonal, physical, energetic sort of construct. They have the energetic construct of a tree of life. What does that mean? It means that a woman, when we are connected, when our hormonal system is fully operational, how? The DNA fully operational, not the 2 strands, not that crap, the full DNA, okay? The ones that they, through their experiments, switched off. Fully operational DNA gives us access to what? Parthenogenesis, amongst other things. I'm gonna get to that in a second. So what they've realized is that a woman is very dangerous, not physically, by no means, of course not. That's their playground, fighting physically, never women, by the virtue of how we are constructed. A woman as a tree of life is connected to the upper kingdom, Norse mythology, upper kingdom and lower kingdom, the underworld and the galactic womb. What does that mean? What's in the middle kingdom? Us. This womb. This womb is the middle kingdom. In the middle kingdom. Why? So that when she's connected, she can bring in, materialize, otherwise called as birth, into this reality. What? Children? That's just a little kind of trick. Can bring much more. And we did. Like what? Well, think about it. If original creation is feminine, and a lot of you probably hear mothers, and you don't have to be a mother, I'm not a mother, of a physical child, to know that just as a woman, right? Just as a woman, always the well-being of a child will be your highest priority, right? You're not gonna terrorize that child so that it can learn lessons. You're not gonna terrorize that child so that it can grow and develop. You're gonna nurture, you're gonna love, you're gonna give them everything they need. That is a loving presence, right? Not some kind of God that requires sacrifices. I mean, what kind of construct is that? Where did that come from? Did that come from us? No, it came from them. The degenerated ones that came here. That was a way to ensure that women are going to lose that connection. Because as long as women have that connection, as long as a woman remains the tree of life, energetically, alchemically, they have no way of being able to be here, of being able to rule, of being able to run their agenda. Why? Because they operate on highly degenerated vibrations. This is very low vibrational energy of what? War, terror, shame, guilt, fear. How is this world looking? I mean, turn on the news, right? It's never good news out there. It's always bad news. Who's running this world? A woman connected as a tree of life alchemizes, transforms, transmutes, immediately cancels. Just like a mother. Imagine, ladies, you would have been pregnant. When you're pregnant with a child, you're connected to that child with an umbilical cord. There is nothing bad that happens there, and you don't have to think about it. That's your natural capacity to nurture, to feed, to grow that child while evacuating whatever sort of waste element, substances that needs to be evacuated from the natural part of our body. So please understand that there is so much more that we are capable of that it's been hidden from us. We have been disconnected from that. Then what happens? Well, we have the story of Jesus, Mary Magdalena, Gnosis, right, shows up. Why? Because that story, by the way, the story of a virgin birth, absolutely. This is not, you know, it's not the first trick here, and it's not a trick at all. John the Baptist, Mary Magdalena, like Maja told you. That was also parthenogenesis. Resurrection. Oh, was that so great? No, not really, because actually if you look hundreds or thousands years back, the same story have been already captured. Mesopotamia. We have Inanna and Dumuzi. Yeah, the same. Isis and Osiris. Resurrection, the same. What's going on? What is that? What is that thing? Well, what is that thing is never ever resurrection, which is described in the Bible as a physical resurrection of a man. That was never originally about physical from the physical death. That was a resurrection of the soul. From what? From something that happened, from something into which the soul has been caught. Which came from where? From this, from the construct. And I will tell you about the construct. Then we have Age of Pisces and Aquarius, one after another. Now we're kind of at the gateway to the Age of Aquarius. We're not quite there yet, if you want to be mathematically very precise, but that's not the point because we can already feel the energies. And then we have the Apocalypse. Well, amazing, because Apocalypse is the revelation of the womb. It is the return of feminine alchemy. Why? Because Age of Aquarius is already coding that. As above, so below. The Age of Aquarius is already coding that. Aquarius is not a man. If you know alchemy, you know that no man would be portrayed holding a chalice, pouring water. That's not a man, I'm sorry. That's Hebe from mythology. The woman with an alabaster jar, Mary Magdalena. Aquarius is a woman. So what is this about? Age of Aquarius. Return of alchemy. Return of alchemy in women. And please do not think, when I use the word alchemy, please do not think that this is some kind of magic tricks. No, it is not. It is the full capacity of our hormonal system. We are capable of so much more. No, not like, you know, I'll be just popping yachts out there for anybody who wants to. No, not exactly. It is a little bit different. It is about materializing, about bringing in the kind of world, the kind of health and experience for everybody, not just for ourselves. Women have a bit of a duty just by the virtue of being women. So gifts of the womb do not belong to women only. They are the blessing for the community. They would have been the blessing for the whole community. That's how it worked. The only thing that remained from those times is the fact that if a man would like to have a child, he knows that he needs to find a woman. That we accept. Well, it happened to be much more than that. And there was balance, because the men had their own function as well, extremely important. One that has never changed. One that still is absolutely valid today as ever. A man is the Grail Knight. Man's job is to protect the woman, is to protect the Grail. A man's job is to create space and conditions for a woman, even today, maybe more today than ever, to create conditions for a woman, not just his woman, so that she can become the Grail, so that she can have the right conditions to step into her alchemy. Because really, really, you know, this is the highest purpose for women today. Of course, we all need to kind of, you know, go from time to time to do some shopping and other things, but, you know, if you have some spare minutes at the end of the day, remember, just remember. So what's feminine alchemy? What's the alchemy? So alchemy comes from the word chem, black, or dark womb, Arabic, Egyptian. And you know, to kind of break it down a little bit, I am an engineer and I don't like to keep it in that kind of boohoo way, you know, alchemy, what is it? What alchemy, why it works, how it's sort of the mechanics behind it, secretions. Secretions are certain substances produced within our body. And as it happens, woman's body is built differently. We happen to have different hormones, different sort of inner construct than man. So therefore, a woman is able to produce certain substances that a man is not. This is not a competition. This is just how it is. So secretions, and if you break it down at this point, you get two words. Secret ions, secret substances, something. So the secretions, specifically the hormones, these are the substances sort of bridging between dimensions. I mean, think about it, right? The woman gets pregnant. She brings a soul from another world, another realm, into this world. She's the shaman. She's the bridge that brings in life into this realm. That's the bridge. What's the example of secretions? Well, for example, the blood. The blood. So, of course, not we're talking menstrual blood. So women are the portals. For children only? Of course not. Of course not. That is the wider capacity that we have been deprived of. We have been, I wouldn't say denied, but we have just moved away from even having that knowledge. Probably many of you heard these phrases, right? The manna, land of milk and honey, the horn of plenty, the sacred cow, the cow, wise Inanna, called the queen of heaven and earth, the cow, the holy cow. Why? What's the cow? The milk. There is always that kind of connotation. So within the capacity of a woman's alchemical abilities is not only birthing, as in materializing into this reality, from what? From the 0 point, if we gonna go down the very scientific route. A woman has an ability as a shaman, as a witch, in her black alchemical aspect, to connect to the 0 point field, to connect to that quantum field of unlimited potential, a black hole, and pull out whatever needs to be materialized. Why? Well, guess what? Because if our hormonal system could work 100%, and if our DNA could be activated 100%, that's what's written in there. That's what's in there. How do we know that? Because these are the stories of our grandmother. These are the stories hidden in the folklore. These are the stories in mythology, but we have to switch off the mind. We have to stop looking at everything through the psychology, mind-based lenses. Because the texts have been tampered with to serve an agenda. And the agenda belongs to the oppressors, not to the ones that are oppressed. That's why it's history. Whereas her story, hidden. So you see, Maiden creates a shaman. 3 aspects of alchemy. As Maja told you about the maiden virgin, absolutely spot on, right? One of the aspects, parthenogenesis. The highest form of creation is parthenogenesis. This is why in all the ancient texts, the original creation doesn't mention a male there. It is just feminine. Maiden, so you see, these are three aspects. They sort of serve different functions. But the maiden aspect, I like to say that it kind of informs the sort of the domino, as you like. Why? Because the maiden aspect in the high initiations back in Egypt or through the mystery schools, in the maiden aspect, mind you, this is not wisdom from some kind of ancient text only, or some kind of mystery schools, purely some weird esoteric stuff. No. This is something that we know from our folklore, from where I'm from. This is what we know, because in every mythology, what do we have? The fates. The fates. In Norse mythology, the Norns. Always three. Always three. And if you know just a little bit of alchemy, and you read a little bit deeper into the meaning of what each of the sisters represent and what do they specifically cover, it's exactly that. It's exactly that. What else is the maiden aspect about? It is, in principle, the maiden, the virgin, is about activation of the DNA. There are certain teachings that specifically in folklore as well, in our fairy tales, little girls are taught what to do, how to connect. The maiden aspect is about creating the connection up. So the tree of life, connection up between the middle world and the upper world. This is the maiden. She needs to connect that, and guess what? This is why the maiden is portrayed with what? With a dove above her head, or a swan. The white and the blue, connection up, connection to the galactic center. Why? Because our original codes of creation are up there, above the firmament, beyond that. This is the teachings, these are the teachings coded into folklore, hidden. Connection up starts our DNA. It allows a woman to reconnect the so-called dormant, or even better, junk DNA that we're told, oh, it's just there, it doesn't mean anything. It's there, it's been switched off, it's been genetically modified, or there's been an intervention into the DNA. By whom? Well, by the ones that came up and created the firmament, to switch off these abilities. Why? Because they were threatening. They were threatening. That construct would never be able to continue and thrive had women continued to stand fully in alchemy. Because a woman transmutes, a woman births realities, a woman is the weaver of the web of life. Maiden aspect, virgin aspect. The first Norn is the weaver. Why the Norns? Why the Fates? Fates are weaving. What do we know about the Fates in every single mythology? That they are in charge of the fate of men, as in humanity, not just males, yeah? Men and gods. That's a major, major information. If the Fates, who are the Fates? Are they some goddesses? No, they're not. No, they're not. Again, please, let's stop looking at it in a literal way. Goddesses, oh, they are so great. No, they're not above us. Goddess. The triple aspect. Whenever three sisters show up, that's your triple aspect. Woman who activates her alchemy is more powerful than the gods. Not in a bad way, we're not going here for a competition, but in a sense, that's exactly why this had to be suppressed. Because maiden aspect, weaving, your own destiny. Why is that critical? Because guess what we have above us? A construct that determines this reality. This is why astrology works and sucks. So if we can activate that, we start weaving, we start creating our own reality. We start deciding, not like, oh, I need to go and ask, is this year good to start business? Oh no, I need to wait 2 years because now it's my 9th year, so it's closing. No. I mean, who wants to live like this? I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, aren't you getting pissed off at that? Because I am. I want to do it, whenever it suits me. So this aspect specifically feeds the rest, because if that activation of the hormonal system doesn't happen here, then we kind of don't have access. We don't have the ability to go forward, to go further, right? Because in the scientific terms, we are literally, this is about DNA. This is about DNA and about the hormonal system. What else this is about? Why Virgin Maiden had to be pure? Of course, we're not talking about sort of sexual purity, right? Some kind of celibacy. No. That's not what we're talking about. More. In the teachings of the feminine line, it is stated very, very clearly that a woman needs to remain a virgin forever. Now you understand why. Because it has nothing to do with her sort of physical state. It has nothing to do with that. Purity that we're talking about here is the purity of the grail. It's the purity of the womb. Translated as, of course, keeping the womb in a high vibration. What does that mean? It means a woman who respects herself, a woman who understands what it means to be the Holy Grail, what kind of alchemical abilities does she have. Therefore, she's not going to engage in certain behaviors. She's not going to be subservient to anybody. She needs to remain free. Alma, right? The woman who's onto herself. She's not bossed around by anybody. She's not dependent. So now we're thinking, oh, no problem, because now it's 21st century, we're so independent. Really? Really? How many of us, right? How many of us are stuck in bad relationships because maybe of the financial reasons or this or that or whatever other excuses? How many of us are proving ourselves at work, outperforming, trying to serve as best as we can? That's not even feminine. That's not even where our true magic lies. That's actually that kind of competition and control, all that kind of stuff. That's not where this is. Where this should be taking us. This is a totally different level of behaviors. So every woman, of course, this is not going to be a test here, but this is for a sort of personal, digestion. Where are we? Because this aspect, there is no ritual to be done. There is no initiation to be done, There is no sort of backflip and then clap 3 times and it's going to activate. It doesn't work like that. It is literally how you live your life, how you are. Do you respect yourself? Are you free? Are you really free? And by free, I mean, is there something that's deciding for you? Is there something that you need to conform to? Are you really living, being fully sort of an expression of whatever you want, rather than whatever is being expected, imposed, etc.? And of course, another thing, the purity of the womb. We're talking the sexual aspect. So, of course, we are talking no sort of level of promiscuity. A woman needs to kind of know who she is. So no low vibrational kind of sexual connections. That's what we understand under that. That includes, of course, whenever a woman is also forced into any sexual activity, or some women might have experienced kind of going along with it. Not so much in your power there. Creator. That's the creator. That aspect is linked to, of course, the color red, the blood. Birthing, materializing, bringing things into the reality. So this is very much about the womb, the ability to materialize, to bring in, but also the feeding aspect. And feeding is not only about feeding a baby, because if you look, for example, to the ancient Egypt, you will see artwork which represents, for example, Isis breastfeeding Osiris. So that has clearly nothing to do with breastfeeding a child. That's something different, and it's probably nothing kinky either. Well, I can tell you that it's not. So this is something totally different. This is a woman's capacity. This is that manna and milk and honey. Okay, this is bringing in. You've heard, right? You've heard the phrase that behind every successful man, stands a woman. Well, that's kind of adaptation to the current times, but really, when we dig into what does that really mean, it meant this, that a woman, because the man is not created this way. The man doesn't have the capacity to be able to sort of materialize bringing certain things. He needed a consort. This is why in the old days, a man would always need a consort. And his power would have been very much dependent on having a woman by his side, so that certain things could have happened for him. Certain reality could have been created for him. That's what she was doing here. That's the feeding. Feeding and birthing. She would connect to that 0-point field. She would materialize whatever was needed. And mind you, we're not talking, we're kind of talking here a little bit like, I always like to make this comparison to the movie Avatar. The first part, I've not even seen the last one. The first part, if you look at that Pandora planet with the blue people living there, that is literally what we're talking about here. It is people living in symbiosis with the planet. There is no money, there is no taxes, there is no work to go to. So we're kind of talking, I don't want to call it utopia, because I think we probably should expect a little bit more from ourselves rather than calling these kind of things utopia. Because that used to be our world. So Avatar is more of a documentary than a fantasy. And finally, shaman, the witch. I mean, honestly, I could do a whole talk on this alone, so I have to kind of condense it. Shaman, the witch, transformation, transmutation, a woman's ability. That's literally where shamanism came from. The woman who walks between the worlds, the woman who can connect to the 0-point field, the woman who can navigate the resurrection of the soul, the resurrection. How? The Inanna descent to the underworld, the shaman's journeys. That's where it comes from. That's what women used to do. That's why the first shamans were women. If you dig into the history of shamanism, shamanism evolved from this, from a very natural capacity of a woman's body. So what happened? So what happened to us? Well, what happened to us is what they did when they came. Why? Because it was threatening. Because a woman, as long as we are connected and have access to these three abilities, it's impossible for them to continue with this reality looking the way it does. So guess what needs to happen? Apocalypse. Return of feminine alchemy. There's not going to be any fight. Nobody's going to be fighting here physically. The fight is not even going to take place. The Ragnarok, okay? So in the Norse mythology, the apocalypse or the end of the world is described very beautifully. the Titans, the children of Gaia, are gonna, or the Jotun in the Norse mythology, they're gonna go against the gods. But not in a physical battle. It's gonna happen because the alchemy is going to return. How do we know that? Age of Aquarius. There are a lot of things. We need to read the alchemical language here. If we don't, we're screwed. This is just a story. It's just a story. It's not a story. It's like what Maja said. If you don't understand the symbology, if we don't understand that mythology is not just a story, it's the truth. The folklore, not just stories to entertain, it's the truth. We have everything right in front of us. We just need the eyes to see, the Gnostic eyes to see. What happened? Again, I just gave you a few different geographies, sort of different texts that explain what happened. So I know that I'm over time, so I'm just going to try to run through this very quickly now. What happens is this mechanism, this firmament, is being brought in, is being created by them, and they are not even hiding it. That's what's written. You can read that in Hermetica, in the Hermetic text. Atum creates Zodiac as control and suffering mechanism for humans. The reincarnation will is created. There is nothing to debate here. We don't need philosophies. I mean, this is right in the open, and that is represented everywhere. If you are an astrologer, I don't like to call myself astrologer because it kind of gives me the wrong affinity, like I support it. I don't support it, but you just have to kind of understand what we're dealing with. I've been always drawn to astrology, numerology, because these are codes of this matrix. They've created, like I say, they've used very advanced technology. We're dealing with AI, very, very advanced AI. Why in the recent years there is such a push on AI? They're starting to, card by card, they're putting their cards on the table. This is not even funny anymore. So if you read, as an astrologer, if you read Piscis Sophia, well, the picture is very, very clear. It describes aeons as the spheres of the zodiac. There is fate. One of the spheres called fate. Well, of course, guess what? There is determinism in astrology, or within this construct. Why? Because it's created for a purpose, and that's the purpose. It is not created so that you can grow. Why do we have to grow? If they didn't capture us and imprisoned, there would be no reason. The only reason we have to grow is because they did this in the first place. So let's not get, pulled into the new agey trick of lessons, etc., which astrology also obviously covers, and karma and all that stuff. I mean, this is the matrix. This is part of the construct. If you want to sign up to that, you do that, but I don't. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in being part of their circus. And that's what we need to see it as. So what happens? In the text, Jesus ascends. And any astrologer that can read the text with understanding and also having the context that, the construct is above us, will see that we're talking about, most likely we're talking about introduction of so-called retrograde movement of the planets. He changes, or he reduces the power by third, the power of the planets, the power of the spheres, yeah? He confuses the horoscope casters, as it says. Why? Because things are not that predictable anymore. He messes with their mechanism. He messes with that mechanism that they've created above. And mind you, when I talk about firmament, I don't care if we are on a flat earth or not. That's not the point. I just know that this is part of the mechanism. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah, so what are we living at? I don't know. Maybe some bigger area. We got sort of captured under the dome with the spheres and aeons, right, above us, and the zodiac being part of this control mechanism. That more, I would call it static control mechanism, right? Which literally, how does that work? It works through wave control. So literally, they are controlling our experience. They sort of sending certain programs depending on configuration with which you are born, which is, by the way, not a soul choice. This is a choice assigned to you as you enter sort of into this reality on a soul level. And guess what? Our ancestors knew it. Inca, Maya, Norse, Egypt. You've probably seen these, right? Very often they get used to talk about the flat earth theory. I don't think it's that relevant here. I don't think it's relevant at all. What I think is relevant here is that all these different cultures had the concept and understanding of the firmament, of the influences on us, and they've captured that into their mythology, into their stories. So in that context, having seen that, what is Sophia? And like I said earlier, you know, Sophia, wisdom of the womb, wisdom of the womb. Why am I mentioning Venus? Because if you read the text with that astrology lens, you discover a whole different dimension. You see, in the ancient times, before the moon, and even after the moon had been put in place, there was reverence of Venus across all cultures. Venus. Not the moon. The moon was brought in, and it's like I say, I'm not gonna sort of present right now evidence why it's not a natural construct, but the moon has been brought in, and in its sort of works and cycles, it imitates Venus. How do we know that? Well, we need to have a look at the moon. Moon has phases. Guess what? Venus has phases, but we don't know that because nobody's looking at Venus. We've been programmed and conditioned to only follow the moon, right? Oh, the moon is linked to the woman's cycle, so all the women have been programmed to believe that the moon is feminine and the moon is what we should be following. Well, I'm here to tell you that actually the ancient cultures were never, ever linking the moon with the feminine. If anything, it's quite the opposite. You know, where I come from, in the Slavic culture, when we say that the wolf howls at the moon to scare it away, because we know, in our heritage, we know that the moon steals the soul. So the moon is not good news, okay? And yes, the moon has been put into certain cycles and things last so many days, and you can find connections to a woman pregnancy, etc., or to the menstrual cycle, but that is not because a woman follows the moon. If you look into the ancient teachings, and not even the ancient, if you look into folklore, women used to be able to control their menstrual cycle. It wasn't the moon, and we were certainly not tuned into the moon. If you know anything about Venus and her phases, she shows up as a so-called morning star, evening star, and then there is a period of invisibility when she is basically, if we look at it from a scientific point of view, she's too close to the sun, can't see it. Yeah? But the point is, if you add the time when she is the morning star and the evening star, if you add that up, guess what you're gonna get? The days. You're gonna get the pregnancy. So So it was actually Venus. The woman's cycles is linked to Venus, not to the moon. The moon is a masculine patriarchal tool that has been put in place to redirect attention and to suppress some of the women's abilities. So where is the Sophia, the fall of Sophia? What does that mean? In the context of everything I said, Sophia, if you read the text as an astrologer or with that astrology lens and with that alchemy lens, Sophia as in representation of that highest feminine principle, she falls from the 13th aeon, which belongs to her, down to the 12th. Guess what's the 12th about? The Zodiac. And she desperately tries to come back. 12 versus 13. 13 is always linked to the feminine principle. But 12 is the masculine. 12 is the samsara. 12 is the will going over and over and over without ever being able to get off that will. That's the reincarnation will. That is the will of the Zodiac that we can never escape. So, is Sophia Venus? Not exactly. We have to again look at it a little bit more alchemically. It's a representation of a principle. What happened here? They've come, the aggressors come, they suppressed the feminine. They've introduced the construct that women have been caught into, that women's full capacity of our hormonal system, our DNA, and yours as men as well, it's been suppressed and controlled by the Zodiac, by the mechanism. So, Sophia, in this context, should be understood as that feminine principle, as that Venus, which literally is connected to the feminine principle. It is very much connected to the feminine principle. Falling, as in being caught into that Zodiac mechanism, but never being off it. Venus has never been corrupted. Venus continues. She's called the twin sister of the Earth. She's called a star, not even a planet. So Venus, Sophia, representing that feminine principle, literally describes what happened here with the introduction of the feminine, with the introduction of this control mechanism. The feminine principle, the feminine capacity has been taken away from us. It's been captured. It's been suppressed. Zodiac has been introduced. So Venus has been captured. That feminine principle has been suppressed into the 12, where she doesn't belong. That's not where we come from. This is not how things look like in the past. That's not how things look like. That's what they looked like from here. So Sophia, the wisdom of the womb, in the context of everything that we've discussed today, is about return of an alchemical woman. It's about return of that feminine principle at Ragnarok. Ragnarok, Old Norse, doom of the gods. They say doom of the gods and men. Nah, the oldest version, doom of the gods. Doom of the gods, the archons, the Anunnaki, the reptilians, the whoever, however we want to call them, the ones who took control of this realm. So you see, if we go back for a minute to Jesus ascending through the different aeons, he is dismantling the construct. He is dismantling the zodiac. He is reducing the predictability, the ability for that zodiac to determine our life. I mean, I don't want to be controlled by something outside of me and being told a good story that this is for my growth. Why? In the first place, I need to grow only because they caught me into this. But guess what? Before, we had a golden age. We had golden age here. It was much more fun than trying to escape prison. So I just tried to capture, that here is the reality controlled by the moon. Yeah, this is the reality. But we are at Ragnarok, at the apocalypse. All the prophecies are talking about the end of the reign of the gods and a new time coming in. And it's the woman that is going to lead that transition. And this is a great responsibility for women, because women need to remember. We need to remember, what are we really constructed for? And that this is our highest purpose at this time. The bad news is, maybe the good news, that Vatican has already confirmed that the apocalypse has already started. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Fall Equinox 2017. Fall Equinox 2017, the sign described in the apocalypse, the Virgin clothed in the sun with the crown of 12 stars above her head, and with a child, pregnant, and the moon at her feet. That's what's described in the apocalypse. That's what sort of sets out the scene. What is that? Again, if you put the astrology, or not even astrology, it's enough to put the astronomy lens, that is a celestial event. That is the time of 23rd of September 2017. We had that alignment in the sky. We had, what does that mean? We had the sun that entered constellation Virgo. We had the Leo, constellation Leo, that obviously lies just before Virgo. That was the 9 stars plus Mercury, Venus, and Mars that were sitting between Leo and Virgo. So them together, 12 stars, and mind you, that picture of a virgin with 12 stars above her head is a picture that can be found in a lot of churches, in a lot of cathedrals all over the world, that's been there, sitting there for hundreds of years. It's a picture that actually predates the apocalypse. Pregnant, Jupiter around her sort of belly, womb area, and the moon at her feet. The moon leaving constellation Virgo and entering Libra. It's a celestial event. And of course, those that want to argue that that already happened before, you have to be able to see the 3 planets. They need to be visible. In the past, they were invisible. In others, there are some other people give other dates, they were invisible. So you couldn't see the crown. It needs to be visible. Planets would have to be visible. So 2017. So the domino is rolling. Good news is, when a woman takes the moon under her feet, we need to understand the alchemy again. When she takes the moon under her feet, it's game over. So alchemically, we are right now getting absolutely the right sort of celestial, cosmic context, if you like, for us to, to be able to turn this around, to go through this portal. Ragnarok also starts with the Ouroboros, or the snake, the serpent that bites his own tail, letting go. The zodiac wheel, or the wheel of samsara, dismantling. So it's the good news. But this is not actually the time to just watch everything unfold. This is the time that the critical part of this process is, it is actually happening through feminine alchemy, and it is a natural process. This is not happening through some weird rituals and some weird kind of moon stuff. No, that's even worse. It's happening through women remembering and stepping, sort of connecting fully to their full capacity. I'm going to have to close now because I'm gonna get beaten up after this. So I think I'm just gonna stop at this one, and perhaps if there's any questions we can cover later.
Yeah, I think for the panel tomorrow. So yeah, if you have questions, please give a round for Ola. Oh, my stars. Thank you. And yes, we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. We're going to move Maja's experience, Sophia, to tomorrow at noon. It's better because at 1 we've got Dan, and we got some setup to do right now. So yeah, see you at 1 o'clock for more Sophia and more simulated realities. Hope you're enjoying it.